I am 82 years old, and today I want to tell you something nobody wants to admit. We are constantly told that the absolute worst thing you can do in your later years is isolate yourself, but I am here. That isolation is sometimes the only way to save your own life. I know this goes against everything the experts say. I know it goes against every brochure sitting in the waiting room of your doctor's office, but those brochures were written by people who still have the energy to waste. I am a retired high school history teacher, and I spent 40 years of my life standing in front of crowded classrooms, managing the chaos of youth, and returning home to a house full of my own children. My entire existence was a symphony of noise and demands, schedules, and obligations. Now my life is very different. It is early morning right now, and I am sitting in my favorite corduroy armchair in the corner of my living room. The house is completely silent, except for the heavy, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I have a ceramic mug of black coffee resting on the small wooden table next to me, and I am watching the dust dance in the single beam of sunlight that is cutting through the gap in the curtains. I can smell the old paper of the books lining my walls, and I can smell the faint, earthy scent of the garden waiting just outside my window. This quiet house is my sanctuary. I built this piece carefully after my wife Sarah passed away 10 years ago. When she first left me, the silence in this house was a terrible, suffocating weight, and I thought it would crush me. But as the years went by, the silence changed its nature, and it became a warm blanket, a deeply familiar companion that never asks me for anything I cannot give. But society simply cannot stand to see an old man sitting alone in a quiet house. People look at my peaceful life and they project their own fears of loneliness onto me. My son David is a good man, but he is trapped in the endless race of his own middle age. He comes over on Sunday afternoons with groceries I do not need, and he looks around my immaculate, quiet living room with a deep sense of pity. He tells me, I am withering away in this old house. He tells me human beings are social creatures, and I need to join the senior community center, find a hobby group, and maybe even find a companion to share my final years with. My neighbor Linda does the same thing when I go out to collect the mail. She leans over the fence and tells me about a lovely, widowed woman she knows, insisting that it is a tragedy for a man of my intelligence to spend his days talking only to his tomato plants. If you hear that, you are broken often enough, you eventually start to believe it. I started looking at my peaceful mornings and wondering if they were actually just symptoms of depression. I let their anxiety become my anxiety, and I decided to take their advice and step back into the world I had so carefully left behind. I agreed to let Linda introduce me to her friend. Her name was Eleanor, and she was 75 years old. She was a retired real estate agent, and she arrived at our first lunch date wearing a bright yellow blouse and smelling strongly of floral perfume. She was energetic and talkative, and for the first few weeks, it actually felt rather nice to have someone sitting across the table from me. We drank coffee at the local diner. We took short walks in the park, and my son David was absolutely thrilled when I told him I was seeing someone. Everyone patted me on the back and congratulated me for rejoining the land of the living, but nobody warned me about the actual cost of letting another human being back into your daily routine when your energy is a finite, declining resource. The trouble did not start with a massive argument. It started with 1,000 tiny, exhausting adjustments that slowly drained the life out of me. Before Eleanor, my telephone was a simple tool that sat silently on the kitchen counter until I needed to call the pharmacy or check on my son. After Eleanor, that piece of plastic became an electronic leash. She loved to send text messages from the moment she woke up. My phone would vibrate on the table while I was trying to read my morning newspaper, pulling me out of my deep focus to look at a picture of her breakfast or to read a long complaint about her neighbor's barking dog. If I did not respond within an hour, she would call me to ask if I was upset with her. I found myself keeping the phone in my shirt pocket, my heart racing slightly every time it buzzed, anticipating another demand for my attention. I was no longer the master of my own morning. My quiet sanctuary was suddenly filled with the invisible, vibrating energy of someone else's neuroses. Then there was the physical and financial toll of maintaining the relationship. When you are 82, your body operates on a very strict energy budget. I have enough energy to tend to my garden, cook my meals, read my history books, and keep my house clean. Eleanor had a restless, nervous energy that required constant motion. She wanted to go to crowded Italian restaurants on Friday nights, where the music was so loud I could barely hear myself think, and the lighting was so dim I could not read the menu. She wanted to drive an hour out of town to look at antique shops on Sunday afternoons. I would come home from these excursions with my knees aching, my lower back throbbing, and my mind completely exhausted. I would need 2 full days of absolute silence just to recover from one afternoon of her company. I was also spending money I had carefully saved for my own medical emergencies. $50 for dinner here, $40 for theater tickets there. And it all added up to a low-level financial anxiety that kept me awake at night. I was literally paying money to be exhausted. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday evening in late November. Eleanor had invited herself over to make dinner for me, claiming I needed a proper home-cooked meal. I sat in my own living room while she clattered around my kitchen, aggressively opening and closing cabinets, moving my perfectly organized pots and pans, and loudly complaining about her adult daughter who never visited her. She had turned the television on to a cable news channel, and the volume was aggressively high, filling my peaceful house with the manufactured panic of talking heads. She walked into the living room carrying a plate of food, sat down on my sofa, and tossed a deeply ugly, brightly colored floral blanket over the back of my favorite corduroy chair because she said the room looked too dull. I looked at that hideous blanket. I listened to the blaring television. I listened to her chewing her food while simultaneously complaining about her cholesterol medication, her daughter, and the weather. I looked at the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, and a profound, heavy realization washed over me. I was sitting right next to a woman who claimed to care for me, and I had never felt more completely, heartbreakingly lonely in my entire life. I realized in that exact moment that I did not miss companionship. I missed myself. I missed my quiet house. I missed my predictable routine. I missed the absolute freedom of not having to manage the emotions, the complaints, and the physical presence of another human being. I was sacrificing the most beautiful, hard-earned piece of my life, simply to make my son and my neighbor feel more comfortable about my old age. I was performing the role of the active senior citizen, while my actual soul was suffocating under the weight of her floral perfume and her endless text messages. I did not finish my dinner. I set my plate down on the coffee table. I looked at Eleanor, and I told her that I could not do this anymore. She was confused at first, and then she was angry. She told me I was being ridiculous, that I was going to die alone in this dusty old house, and that I was pushing away the only person who was willing to put up with my stubbornness. I did not argue with her. I simply stood up, folded her ugly floral blanket, handed it to her, and walked her to the front door. When her car finally pulled out of my driveway, I walked back inside my house. I turned off the television. I washed the plates in the sink. I sat back down in my corduroy chair, and I let the deep, magnificent silence wash over me like a healing rain. The tension in my shoulders disappeared, my jaw unclenched, and the beautiful, heavy stillness of my own life rushed back in to comfort me. If you are listening to me right now, and you are feeling the crushing pressure to stay active, to date, to fill your calendar, to keep toxic family members in your life, simply because you are afraid of the quiet, I am giving you permission to stop. You are not being selfish. You are not a broken machine that needs to be fixed by constant socializing. You have spent your entire life working, raising children, compromising, and giving your energy to bosses, to spouses, and to a society that never stops taking. You have paid your dues in full. You do not owe the world a cheerful, social performance in your final chapter. Your house is not a prison. Your house is a fortress that you built with a lifetime of labor, and you have the absolute right to pull up the drawbridge and sit quietly in the courtyard. Do not let younger people who still have boundless energy make you feel guilty for protecting the small amount of voltage you have left. They do not understand how expensive it is for you to just sit in a loud restaurant and pretend to care about a conversation. They do not understand that for us, a quiet morning with a cup of black coffee is not an empty schedule. It is a grand event, a glorious achievement of peace. Erase the numbers from your phone that bring you anxiety. Decline the invitations that make your stomach tie in knots. Stop opening your front door to people who treat your sanctuary like a dumping ground for their emotional baggage. You are the architect of your remaining days, and if you want those days to be silent, predictable, and entirely your own, that is a beautiful way to live. Peace is expensive. Stop giving it away for free.